In any one day, you are subjected to a huge amount of jargon. Not necessarily even just legalese, just in your work, in your play, at your schools. Do you have people coming up to you and saying things where at the end of it you're just going, what have you just said to me? We're going to celebrate this today on Drop the Jargon Day. How can we just make things a hell of a lot simpler? You might have some suggestions, 1300 222 891. Cathy Basterfield is from Access Early English. Every single day, Cathy, I think we get this.
Yes, we certainly do. And thanks very much for asking me on.
Now, Cathy, why is it important to drop the jargon? This has become so much a part of so many different aspects of our lives. Are we ever going to have success in dropping jargon?
Oh, well, look, I hope so. In terms of the work that we do, Access Easy English, our big thing is to remove all the jargon. It's not just the legalese, it's the things that we just forget a jargon because we use them every day in our own workspaces. They become our go-to words at work. My job in coming to your business is not to learn your words. You need to be able to teach me, as that previous caller just said, in those very easy-to-use, simple words. And then we'll all understand and we'll not get confused.
Yeah. This is the thing, though, isn't it? I wonder, we think jargon makes you look cool, but I think what it does is just becomes a bit of a crutch.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it certainly does. And sometimes I think when you see a sentence or someone speaking and all they use is big words, I go, do they really know what they mean? Or let's actually turn it around the other way and go, does he mean the same things as I do when I'm hearing that phrase?
What are some of the things you're talking about there?
Well, I just have a bit of a laugh. One of the things we run in training is have a look at your job title. Not your actual, not the job that you've applied for. What's the job title you've actually got? A systems administrator. What's that? Not sure. I think a systems is meant to be IT. Is that the IT person who can help me with my computer? Or, what's a service manager?
That's interesting, because I would have thought the systems administrator was one of the simple ones out there, but actually now that you think about it, it's really not, is it?
No, not at all. What systems is he talking about? And then I think, well, actually, if you're an administrator, okay, you might have an administrator who's an administrative assistant. Is it that sort of administrator that we're talking about? Oh, I don't think so. No, not that sort of one. There's some very unusual titles that we all have, and I think, when we get emails from the government departments, I think they're some of the funniest ones because I'm really not quite sure what they're all about.
Well, on that note, I mean, it's not just big words, is it? It's sometimes the deconstruction of words. I mean, this texter here says, a meeting full of acronyms drives me nuts. That's Antoinette.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And that's that same thing about assuming that we all know what those acronyms mean, and we can't assume that we know what they mean. We've found in the work that we do that if there's one acronym that is pretty well known, that's enough. Any more than that, it's just a whole lot of other unknown words that we're trying to mix into sentences that just don't make any sense. Yeah, very definitely. But I mean, we look at also any word that's more than a single syllable. Anything that's like that, that's jargon.
Any word that's more than a single syllable?
Yep. So for people with low literacy, anything that's more than a single syllable in length is just so much harder for them to read and understand. Why do we use, things like attempt to do when we could say try?
Well, this is true, but I bet you get a whole heap of people, Cathy, who will be saying to you, why are you trying to dumb down the language?
Well, we're not trying to dumb it down because at the end of the day, and you would know this as a communicator, what we wanting to do is to communicate with each other as effectively and as fast as possible without confusing each other. And if that means that I can read something without having to stop and think about what it means, we've communicated really effectively. And I think we forget, particularly in writing, that 44% of us do not have the literacy to manage that complex language that is out there.
How many? 44%, nearly 1 in 2 of us.
Yep, no, 44, that's right. But if it's about health information, it's 60%. 60% of us have difficulty understanding all that health language that's out there. So no wonder we come away from our doctors scratching our heads. That's why it's not about us learning new words. It's about them explaining their long words in everyday words.
So when it comes to the discussions we have and the talk we had, do you think we need to drop the jargon just in those official capacities that are about, front-facing, public-type areas, or right across the board?
Look, I think it's right across the board. I think we try to blind each other with amazing science and really what we want to do is have good communication with each other. And it's about knowing what the people that you're communicating with understand. And if you're all, if I'm sitting down with a group of speech pathologists like myself, I'm a speech pathologist, I can sit and use the big words of speech pathology. But if I turned around and used some of that language when I was chatting with my girlfriends, it's not going to work because they don't know about that language. So if I said the word dysphagia, it's a word that we use in speech pathology, you'd sort of be a bit blank.
Yeah.
Well, let's just call it swallowing. It's all about swallowing.
Yeah, yeah. You're listening to ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australian Broken Hill. With me is Cathy Basterfield. She's from Access Early English. We're talking with her on Drop the Jargon Day. That's the call. Do you think it's right? Do you think we should be dropping the jargon? What bit of jargon really gets your goat? What annoys you the most? 1300 222 891. Gee, that's opening. That's a question to open the channels, isn't it, Cathy?
Absolutely, yes. I think everyone's got their favourite one that they hate to hear people using. And it's like someone said, it's not just meetings, but it's all the ones we were just chatting in staff meeting this morning. Stakeholder engagement. What's that?
Well, I kind of know what it is. It's talking to people, isn't it, who have a vested interest in things. Absolutely. Yeah, but, we were then talking about agency and saying agency. So is that personal agency or the agency in the place that you go? So that's that confusion. You're using the word, but I don't know as the listener which agency you mean. Would it be fair to say, do you think, I have this theory that the public service, if you're a public servant, you tend to do this more than most, because I find that those in the public service have a lot of acronyms and terms that are very in-house, but it seems to translate into everyday.
Yeah, it seems to sort of be more and more that you're seeing it, but we also think about it in terms of if it's not public service language, maybe it's corporate language.
Yes, paradigms. Paradigms are everywhere, aren't there? After COVID, the new paradigm.
Yeah, absolutely. And what do we really mean by that? And, even things like, going back to COVID, one of the things that for the work we do for people with really low literacy, but it also affected us, was people kept talking about PPE. I go, what's PPE? PPE. Oh, that's all that stuff that they put on to protect themselves.
Personal protective equipment. Yes, it is.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right, yep. So we actually had to unpack that so that people knew what this new piece of language was, because it was going to get used so much.
This texter says a company that I was recently dealing with renamed their human resources department People and Choices. I knew straight away they would be full of more paperwork and hoops to go through. Sure enough, I received a 30-page document to sign and attachments and to continue a job for a client I'd been dealing with happily for nearly 18 years.
Yep.
I mentioned this earlier, though, that you're going to get people who are going to say, well, hang on, we don't want you dumbing down the language. That stops us from thinking, says Ali. It creates robots. Dell says, bring people up, not dumb them down. Issues with reading and an understanding is derived from good education. So on this day of dropping the jargon day, why do you think it's important we look at simplifying the language we speak about?
Okay, so, it's, yes, at school and at university we need to extend our language, and certainly, that's great for us as well. But if you're in public domain communication, what you want to do is to make it so simple and so easy to be able to use and understand. Doesn't mean you're not going to still have that language to use in other places, but public domain information, public health information needs to be really clear and simple so it's not miscommunicated. And, there's no barriers then to actually understanding it.
Yeah. Well, how do we get to this, to some kind of middle ground where we drop jargon but don't have to be talking like, grade twos?
Yes, yeah. So that's where, plain language fits in really, really nicely. So plain language is meant to be written to about a Year 9 average reader sort of level. And that's what all public information should be. In fact, all websites should be no more than that level. And a couple of countries have mandated plain language.
Okay, so you're not having a problem with people speaking that way amongst themselves and when they engage with people, but when it comes to public information on websites, that sort of thing, grade 2 level is fine because that's where a lot of the people are at that will be accessing those things.
Absolutely, absolutely. But also too, you've got this other level, which is plain language, which is saying, look, this is what the average person supposedly is be able to read and understand, and that's what should be mandated to remove the jargon. So don't assume that people can read all those complex words that are sitting there that might be very specific to a particular profession.
Yeah, right. This texter says air traffic control is an interesting example. There's a whole different way of communicating, all aimed at brevity and clarity.
Doesn't that sound wonderful?
Now, so I don't know how they go about it, but you can see that they need to get messages across in as few words as possible in a potential emergency situation so that there's no confusion.
But also, too, they're probably talking with people don't have English as the first language. So a lot of pilots wouldn't have that. So it has to be really clear that the language that they're using in English is exactly what those pilots can understand.
Steve on the text line says, I'm sick of unpacking things. What's wrong with just explain? Let's unpack this rather than explain this. When Steph says, when writing reports to government, I prepare the report, then insert the government jargon. Oh, that's funny. And Sonya says, try understanding any rules for government departments. You will have to learn a complete new language. It is completely user-unfriendly, difficult and unnecessary.
Yeah, and that I think is one of the difficulties in trying to use some of the departments, some of the agencies and, like the funding for the NDIS is that families have had to learn the jargon to be able to explain what it is that their child needs rather than saying, this is what my child is and this is what my child's needs are. They've had to learn the jargon that the agency has decided we're all going to start to use.
One texter says, I hate impact or impacted. It's a bloody noun, says this person. Sean in Mount Gambier says, I love big words though. If you can't enjoy a bit of obfuscation every now and again, politicians and lawmakers will be out of a job pretty soon. We need some big words though for everyday life that actually provide clarification to situations. But when dealing with people, you need a small to large literary handbook. Do you think that people using these words always know what they mean?
Is that asking me? Or
yes, I'm asking you. I'm asking you, Cathy Basterfield.
I actually don't think that everyone knows what all those big words necessarily mean. No. And, if you're listening to someone who's using lots of big words, maybe that's their way of hiding what they really don't understand.
Yeah. I often feel like they're used as crutches while they're waiting or thinking about what the next thing they have to say is. But we also can't get away from the fact that, particularly when you're working within certain industries, certain words or language apply to that industry. There is industry-based language, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And we're not saying get rid of that English-based language. It's more that making sure that everyone in your industry understands what that means, particularly if someone's coming on board into your department or whatever it is. But then if you're doing public-facing information, so an example might be, say, in an emergency situation, there's internal information that they might use, that firefighters might use with each other or SES people in floods. But now you're communicating with the public, you've got to be really clear that language is actually very specific and that people actually understand it. Yeah.
Well,
and more so, particularly in those situations, because in emergencies, all of us struggle to understand.
And so that's particularly where we need to get into really clearly communicate all the things that we need to say.
Absolutely. Yep.
Cathy, thank you for that. Kurt has rung from Norton Summit. Hello, Kurt. You gave us this example of the air traffic control. What can you tell us about that, Kurt? Are you a pilot?
I fly small planes, yes.
Right. You're in a very windy area right now, Kurt. But
yeah, I'm heading back towards the car to get a little shelter. I mean, when you get a pilot's license, being able to communicate with air traffic control is a whole another section of the course. So you actually need to be certified in that before you're allowed to fly into controlled airspace and talk to these guys. But everything is always uniform, and pretty much everything is abbreviated.
So it's a very limited but precise language that is used.
Massively precise. And so what's impressive about it is how much you can communicate by saying so little.
Okay. Give us an example.
Oh, gosh. Okay. I was recently flying over Adelaide and wanted to descend to 5,000 feet because there was a great big cloud in my way. And my communication to air traffic control was Adelaide Centre, Charlie X-ray Foxtrot, request 5,000 due cloud. They then said, Charlie X-ray Foxtrot, descend 5,000. I said 5,000, Charlie X-ray Foxtrot. So any instruction they give you, you have to repeat back to them so they're clear that you've understood that. But, you know, and a lot of things you'll acknowledge just by giving your call sign. Like They might say, have you understood that? Everything okay with that? And you might just say Charlie X-ray Foxtrot.
I actually think it would be a great thing to bring back. Just repeat what you've understood. I said. In the way that you just described, Kurt, because how many times are things misinterpreted? That's great.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah, good on you, Kurt.
Impossible with that. And then the tricky bit gets when they might give you some information and instructions. You don't repeat the information back, but you do repeat the instructions back. So the line can get a little blurred sometimes. But it's impressive listening to them how much they get across with so little communication.
Yeah, interesting, Kurt. Cathy, that would be great to translate that into other aspects of life, wouldn't it?
It certainly would, and it certainly sounds, I mean, there's a couple of things that my head goes to. It needs to be short so you can remember it, to repeat it back.
Yes.
But then, as Kurt was saying, that you actually have to think about, part of the learning of before you become a pilot is to learn what those phrases all mean. So there you've got that joint meaning. So we all agree that this means this, and so we all use this phrase, which is really, really important for their clear communication. Absolutely.
Cathy, have you ever met people? I have. Who just use so many words. I mean, I know I'm in the business of broadcasting, so we probably speak more than the average number of words in a day than people. So it's sounding probably a bit hypocritical coming from me, where I'm here filling space. But you meet people who they just want to say one thing and they give you a paragraph.
Yes, they do, don't they? Yes.
God, it drives me insane.
Why they do that? Well, it could. If that annoys you, it certainly is driving you insane. No, there could be a whole lot of reasons why they do that. Anything from feeling nervous to maybe they have difficulty finding the right words to actually use.
So you just keep using words until you find the right ones, hoping that somewhere in there there'll be the right ones. Yeah.
Yep. And look, there's certainly certain disabilities or acquired disabilities where, you might call it like cocktail language, where they're just talking, and there's not a whole lot in it as well.
Yeah.
So there can be lots of different reasons, or people have difficulty processing what they're saying and don't realise what they're saying, sort of start talking before they really think it through.
Yes. Cathy, well, look, for one day at least, you're encouraging us to drop the jargon and clean up our act. For this year at least, let's start thinking about cleaning up our language act in order to be safe, informed and part of your community. I don't think that means we have to dumb things down, but when it comes to communicating about important issues, let's get rid of the jargon, is the call today. Cathy Basterfield from Access Early English. What bit of jargon annoys you the most? I'd love to hear from you. 1300 222 891, 1300 222 891. Wayne, you agree that using acronyms is annoying, but you say it's not necessarily a faster way of saying something. They usually have to explain it, so then it takes twice as long to explain. fairly observant comment there. John in Wallaroo, you said, yes, Minister, the TV show was very courageous dealing with these kinds of things. Stephen from Aberfoyle Park says there were far too many acronyms floating around in the tax office. You were happy to retire a little bit earlier. And this texter says, oh my God, try talking to the aged care people. It is so confusing. I'm getting so lost in the system of jargon. Dave says he's having that with Centrelink. You said Centrelink speakers doing your head in as you don't speak. AI, please go back to real people, urges Dave. What bit of jargon annoys you the most? It's 28 minutes to 4 here on ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australia and Broken Hill. Now, coming up in a moment, how much easier would it be for you to know how at risk your home would be in a bushfire, whether it would survive a bushfire? Well, now you can know more accurately. You're going to find out how in a moment.
If you were listening to ABC Radio Adelaide, you'd have heard this.
Can you register and insure a scissor lift?
Good question. On air?
We've got to be much tougher because our listeners are much smarter than the breakfast ones.
Online?
Please make sure you give me a call. I love to hear your voices. I love to hear you talking to me about these things.
On digital?
This is so Australian. How can you go against it?
And on the ABC Listen app.
The entire weather forecast for the entire state is sunny.
ABC Radio Adelaide.
Every day's a beautiful day with 891, isn't it?
Spend a perfect afternoon with Sonya Feldhoff.
On ABC Radio Adelaide, South Australia and Broken Hill.
Now, Jules Schiller off again today. Jason Chong will be hosting the Drive program after 4 o'clock today. So no off the cuff. Just looking at some of the text on this, I'm feeling a bit discombobulated now. Well, that's more than one syllable. Jason's given us a ring from Glenelg, not Jason Chong, presumably. Another one. Hello, Jason.
Hi, how you going?
Yeah, not bad.
Yeah, look, I was just listening to the conversation you guys had, and I think there's definitely merit in both arguments. I deal in customer service personally, and depending on the age bracket of the customer you're dealing with, sometimes you do want to use reasonably simple language. But I'm also a father of 2 children too, so I think there's some merit in using complex words that the children might not have heard before, but in a context they can understand to help them increase their vocabulary. And I was also, when I was brought up, I learned a second language sort of simultaneously at the same time as I learned English.
Oh,
and
wow.
my native language is Maltese, and there's actually different aspects of Maltese. Like, for instance, when you're talking about a cat or a dog, you can't say cat or dog. You've actually got to specify whether it's a female dog or a male dog, and you can't just say dog. And it's like that with most animals, and same with people, and same with colours. Colours will actually change the name of the colour depending if it's a male cockroach that's black or a female cockroach that's red.
Oh, my goodness, that's confusing, Jason.
So when you're talking in this language, you're very clear with the term you're using, or it's a female beetle and it's red. And you can't use the same language for either the female or the male version of the beetle, and also the colour would change as well. And the reason why I bring that up, it's a complicated language, but compared to other languages like Arabic is very similar. And so are other types of Afghanistan, like native languages. But where I'm going with this is English is actually quite I don't want to use the word lazy, but the amount of words you can use are very limited.
Yeah.
And same with different like languages, like Hebrew language, for instance. There's like 5 or 7 types of love. So you can actually describe the love between a husband and a wife, and that would be one word, and then you can use the word love between, say, a brother and sister, or a love between 2 friends. And that's a different kind of love. So depending on the love that you reference, it will automatically indicate your relationship status or arrangement with the person you're actually talking about. So coming from that sort of background, English is actually quite a simple language from that sense. So I think it's important to, like, just covering what I said before, just be aware of who you're communicating with and just use the correct language that you think might be fitting for the situation that you're in.
Gee, that's really fascinating, hearing the differences between those languages, Jason. For those of us who aren't familiar with Maltese, or perhaps some of those more, from our point of view, complicated languages, what's your view then on jargon? Does that have a role, or do you reckon we could drop the jargon pretty easily, though? These are those kind of words or crutches or terminologies that people seem to rely on, that everyone's it's a bit nebulous about what some of them mean.
I think it depends on who you're talking to. If I'm communicating with my parents, I wouldn't use certain tech acronyms because they're not going to understand it. But if I use the longer version, they will understand it. And once again, through time, they start using them themselves. Like, I remember when, like, www came out.
Yep.
My friend pointed out it's actually quicker to say World Wide Web than www. But everyone says www, and it's actually longer than saying World Wide Web. So I think it just depends on what field you're in and whether it's, like, relative to what you're talking about. So I'm an electrician, and we do use a lot of technical jargon, but if you invite me to your house to fix a problem, there's no point in me communicating to you in technical jargon what the problem is. I've got to simplify it so the householder can understand what I'm doing. And at the same time, I don't want to oversimplify it because, they're paying me by the hour, so I actually want to seem that I'm educated and know exactly what's going on and try and communicate that in the best language.
Well,
if it turns to my apprentice, I might say the same thing using acronyms or abbreviations. But the thing you mentioned before about attempt or try, then you could turn around and say, well, why not say have a go? But, have a go or try or attempt, they have sort of different meanings in the way of, like, how much effort you'd put in. It's almost like give it a go. Doesn't seem as sort of deliberate as, give it a try. Or if you say attempt, it adds another layer of, like, really give it a good, solid go. Do you know what I mean? So depending on the circumstances, especially if you're dealing with, say, law enforcement or the courts, well, these certain words are used politically to put your point across, and that's another interesting thing too. The Maltese news, for instance, is spoken in a way that the general common people would not speak at home. So you wouldn't speak the way they speak when they present the news at home. It's almost a completely different language altogether.
Really? So it's a higher form of the language, is it? It's considered more sophisticated.
So if you're watching, say, Neighbours or Home and Away, for instance, that language would not be similar language that they would use if you're watching, say, Take Night or 60 Minutes. They use a different set of languages there.
Yeah. So, that is interesting then, isn't it, about the in terms of your example about the have a go, try, attempt, those sorts of things. It might depend on the people you're speaking with too, about whether it's conversational, whether it's professional, those sorts of things. That all plays into the sorts of words and phrases you might use.
Like I said, I think it's just you got to just look at the situation you're dealing with and change accordingly. But I think especially we deal with a lot of children. We've got a lot of educators in our circle of friends, and I actually bought this book, and it comes with a set of playing cards, and there's about 5,000 cards, and it's got a different word. It starts from like year 6 all the way to year 12, and just for a laugh, we'll just grab them randomly and just see how many you can go through before you pick a word you can't actually find. You don't know what the definition is, and they're supposed to be like age appropriate, obviously, for cards. But there's a lot of words in the year 11, year 12 vernacular that most adults actually wouldn't know and don't know. But, technically high school students should actually know the meaning of them. So it's always good to just, if you're bored one day, pick up one of those and have a flick through it and see how many you actually know and try and increase your vocabulary.
Well, Jason, it's really good talking with you. You're working on a job at Glenelg at the moment or somewhere else?
Well, I actually pulled over, but I've just finished work today.
Oh, good on you. Well, I hope you get to sit back and relax and have some fun time with your kids. Thanks for your call. It was great hearing from you. Deb on the text line says, reach out to us. Everyone is reaching out. Where did this phrase come from? I'm so over it. Whatever happened to the word contact? Sandy. Oh, this is a problem, isn't it? Take the acronym AI. I used it earlier, meaning artificial intelligence. She says, I'm from the country, so to me, it just means artificial insemination. Thank you. I'm going to a work conference soon and my eyes will glaze over with the jargon they will lean into. Thank you for that. John in Wallaroo, you say the one I hate is when asked about high food and drink prices at Adelaide Oval, all the boss said was, that's our business model. And Ruth at Clayton Bay, you say everything these days is nuanced. It drives me bonkers. Ticks all the boxes is another thing that's driving some of you mad. Makes me think of form filling, which I hate. What's wrong with covers all requirements? Has everything we need. And someone simply says, I love a good TLA. Don't know what that acronym means. Have to have a look at that one. We're still asking you for the wrong things that you've said to the wrong person. 1300 222 891. You can also text through on 0467 922 891. Let's have some Roxy music. Here is Love is the Drug.